Doctor, is there anything I can help with?
After finishing my usual work shift, I was heading home to my apartment in the city. Working through downtown shopping district, I noticed a crowd gathering. The smell of something burnt filled the air, and the red lights of ambulances and police cars illuminated the area. I knew right away it was an accident. I pushed through the onlookers to get to the police tape. I then identified myself to the paramedics, who were wearing white uniforms and helmets.
Vitals are stable!
The paramedic informed me. Stable vitals in this context meant that the injured person's pulse, breathing, blood pressure, and body temperature were all normal.
SQ is working on extraction. Fast trash near helt your contrasting of a hinderbertan frizy deed other help.
The young female paramedic energetically said this and gave me a quick salute. The crowd of onlookers kept coming. Some got bored and left, but even more people continued to arrive. I stood there silently watching the rescue operations. Then, the young female paramedic came rushing over to me and asked for my contact information. I pulled my wallet out of my back pocket and gave her my business card from the medical clinic where I work. She compared the card and my face, looking back and forth between the two. Am I being suspected of something? Admittedly, at that time, I was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, a pretty casual look. But to anyone who saw me, I probably didn't look like a typical 28-year-old doctor. I wondered if they thought I was some sort of fake doctor, just goofing around. Within 10 minutes, a new ambulance arrived, and a doctor wearing a white coat with disaster medical teams written on the back got off the ambulance. The rescued patient was escorted into the ambulance by this doctor. I watched the ambulance speed off, then decided it was time for me to leave the scene. As I walked through the dispersing crowd, I noticed some people smirking as they looked at me. They were laughing and discussing whether or not I was a real doctor, even though I didn't do anything. I felt somewhat embarrassed, having impulsively offered my help as a doctor only to be superfluous in the end. Was I just another onlooker like everyone else who had gathered there? I've been employed at the current medical clinic for just under 2 years. I was a fledgling doctor with little experience. Yet, when I treated patients at the clinic, they called me Ox. Had that gone to my head? Is that why I had overstepped at the accident scene, announcing I was a doctor even though no one had asked? For a while after that, I kept questioning myself, almost to the point of absurdity. But as the days went by and work got busy, I started to forget about the whole thing. It was around that time, during my work hours, when the receptionist at the clinic forwarded an external call to me.
Yes, this is David.
Retribution Sierra. To my surprise, the call was from the female paramedic who had given my business card to at the accident scene.
Thank you, so that one. Hey, let's start ditching for your news or your advice. Pressure advice. No problem, Sylvester Specialty.
She went on to say that as paramedics, they aren't doctors and can only perform limited medical procedures. So even during emergency activities, there's always a sense of unease.
That's why just having a doctor like you at the scene made us more at ease to do our jobs. Dora,
Her words left me feeling a mixture of happiness and embarrassment, and I was somewhat at a loss.
I apologize for the late thank you. You not a barrier. You were really a great help at that time.
With that, the call ended. Well, it's just polite talk, I guess. Well, I appreciated her thanks. I took her kind words lightly. Some weeks later, I was on the high-speed train to go to the general hospital where I was going to do my internship. While relaxing and reading a comic book I'd bought at the station's kiosk, an announcement came over the intercom. Is there a doctor in here? It was a medical emergency call. I looked up from my comic book. I looked around the train car, taking in the faces of the passengers. No one else stood up. At least in this car, there wasn't another doctor besides me. You get the sense of urgency ran through me. I gotta get moving. But at the same time, doubts flooded my mind. Could I actually handle this situation? Just then, the conductor hurriedly passed by in the aisle. No time for dilly-dallying. I steeled myself, preparing to stand up. But my legs felt weak and I couldn't rise. That's when it happened.
Thank you so much for your help back then.
I remembered the voice of the paramedic who had called me after the accident. I had identified myself as a doctor but couldn't actually do anything at the scene. Didn't I become a doctor to save lives? I gave myself a mental kick in the pants and finally stood up. I rushed after the conductor, moving through 2 or 3 cars. Once I caught up, I tapped him on the back. "Excuse me?" The conductor turned towards me and asked what I needed.
I'm a doctor. I'm a doctor.
Hearing that, he respectfully stepped aside to show me a seat up ahead. There was a man in his 50s, stethoscope in hand, reassuring a patient. Well, I had hesitated. Another doctor had answered the call. I felt relieved, but also ashamed of myself. I turned to head back to my seat, and as I stepped onto the deck, I felt a tap on my shoulder. What a crazy coincidence. "Dr. Jones?" The person who spoke was a young woman. I didn't know anyone around here, and she wasn't a patient I'd treated in my clinic either. I couldn't immediately place who she was. Dressed in a feminine dress, her hair flowing and glossy, her makeup natural but not overly done, and her skin clear and radiant, she caught my eye. May I ask who you are?" With that, the young woman stood at attention, brought her hand up to the side of her head, and saluted. "Oh, you're the paramedic from that time?" Once I finally recognized her, she dropped her salute and beamed a radiant smile. While we were talking on the deck, the conductor from before passed by. She asked the conductor if she could move to the seat next to mine. Fortunately, the seat next to me was empty, and the conductor agreed. So that's how we ended up sitting next to each other for the remainder of the trip.
Nice to meet you again. My name is Lori.
I'm David. I'm your guy.
I was reminded of college parties from my younger days. She was on vacation, heading back to her parents' home. She was 26, 2 years younger than me. She became a firefighter 7 years ago and had earned her paramedic license less than a year ago. Turns out, another doctor had already arrived. She had been watching the situation unfold when I showed up late to the scene. When I said that in a self-deprecating way, she looked at me with puzzled eyes.
Listen, because it sounded dumb and awkward.
Actually, I confessed that I hesitated to identify myself as a doctor, which is why I didn't stand up immediately. She kept her eyes locked onto mine without looking away. I felt the intensity of her gaze and lowered my face. Just then, a cart-pushing snack vendor walked by. I raised my hand to stop her and ordered 2 coffees. She held her cup of coffee in both hands and seemed to be searching for the right words to say.
Sugar and milk.
The silence was uncomfortable, so I broke it.
But you did step up. You went to the patient and said, "I'm a doctor." But you did step up. You went to the scene. Why'd you do it? You could have just ignored it.
Her question made me think. I realized I could have ignored it. I did hesitate when I heard the emergency call, wondering if I should identify myself. But if I had decided to ignore it from the beginning, I wouldn't have had any doubts. Ultimately, it's my job as a doctor to save lives. That's why I became a doctor in the first place. When I said that, she nodded deeply without breaking her gaze ahead. Then she slowly turned to me, looking me straight in the eyes.
Oh, was something up?
I felt flustered by the intensity of her gaze.
That's wonderful. I'd almost forgotten why I got into this line of work myself.
My mind was in a whirl, but being called wonderful made me feel slightly embarrassed.
Actually, it was the phone call you gave me that time that made me speak up. Thank you for that call. Why would I?
The call had given me the push I needed to identify myself as a doctor.
Really?
Really treated so brazier alive.
Our faces naturally moved closer, locking eyes.
I thought it was just a courtesy call when I received it. I briskly know when I received it.
Things looking slightly annoyed.
Even during that accident, just like today, I wasn't much help. I wasn't much silly.
No, that's not true. Just having you there made a huge difference. I felt saved.
Although she's a paramedic, her medical practice is limited compared to a doctor's. When things get out of hand, they have no choice but to rely on a physician. So, she said, just having a doctor like me at the scene provided enough reassurance to perform life-saving procedures.
Isn't that how it is?
That's exactly how it is.
She then shared that she's going back home to discuss her future with her parents, who have been skeptical about her career in emergency services. However, her parents do acknowledge that being a paramedic is a meaningful and respectable job. But why did they insist that I shouldn't be doing this job? The work involves 24-hour shifts and is never easy. It's physically demanding and can sometimes be risky. Also, women only make up a small percentage of firefighters, including paramedics. It's still very much a man's world. It is probably a parent's desire to have her daughter have an easier job out of love for her.
I can understand why your parents would be against it.
Being a paramedic is tough.
She turned away as if pouting. I found her reaction irresistibly cute. An announcement over the intercom said that we were approaching the final stop. We both took down our bags from the overhead bin and started preparing to get off the train. Then something crossed my mind. So, I decided to ask her.
Did I give you my business card at the accident site?
She nodded yes.
I asked her why she kept comparing my face to the business card back then.
Did you think of some kind of fake doctor?
Then she waved her hand sideways in front of me, saying no. It turned out that she lived very close to my clinic and had walked past it nearly every day. She was surprised to see that I was the doctor who worked there. After that, we both got off the train and walked together to the ticket gates.
Doctor, thanks for spending time with me today.
And she discovery. What are you talking about?
As I looked puzzled, she continued. She had been wrestling with how to convince her parents to accept her choice of becoming a paramedic. Talking to me during that train ride on the Amtrak helped her clarify her thoughts.
I'll tell them. I don't want to leave emergency work to someone else. It's not about why should I do it. It's I can do it because it's me.
With that, she gave me a warm smile and strode away with confidence. 3 weeks passed since that day. We hadn't met or even communicated with her since then. But then, during my lunch break that day, I decided to check out a new restaurant across the station from my clinic that the staff had been raving about. Looking back, lost in thoughts about the afternoon schedule, I saw a woman in a tracksuit standing in front of a vending machine. I figured she was probably just indecisive about what to buy and walked on by.
But then, Dr. Jones.
It was her who had called out. She was radiant, even in her jogging outfit, just as she was when I saw her on the train.
Wow, it's you! Lori! At Crossburn. You just let it down, their system.
She was off that day and had been out jogging. She said she'd been thirsty and was looking to grab something from the vending machine, but all they had were sugary drinks, so she was undecided. As I headed back to my clinic, she decided to tag along. She gave up on the vending machine and picked up some seltzer water from a convenience store on the way.
Speaking of which, did your parents give their approval?
Taking a sip of her freshly bought seltzer water, she answered,
Yeah, I managed to convince them.
I felt proud of her for saying that with such confidence.
What do you think about female paramedics? Doc?
Caught off guard by her sudden question, I hesitated to answer.
Well, it's a meaningful and respectable job, regardless of gender.
As I was saying this, she interrupted me.
I'm not talking about in general. I mean, what do you think about someone like me, a female paramedic?
Oh, being female doesn't really change anything.
She took my hand, which was visibly confused, and she said,
You know, this is the 3rd time we've randomly run into each other. Maybe it's not so random after all.
From then on, we started to meet up whenever we could find a spare moment in our busy schedules. On a rare evening when both of us were off,
How about one more glass of wine?
I asked her at a restaurant across from the station.
Sounds good. Just one more glass. We're a doctor and a paramedic, but it's not a crime to let loose once in a while.
She said that, but before ordering another glass of wine, she started to feel tipsy and seemed like she was about to become unsteady. This isn't good. I raised my hand to signal the waiter to hold off on further orders.
Then she snapped back to reality and asked, What about the wine? Doc?
As doctors, it went maturity orders you for tonight. Relax, sleepy. I cheer 'em.
She gave a slight nod and looked up at me. Her eyes slightly unfocused due to both sleepiness and wine. I found her incredibly endearing. After leaving the restaurant, we took a long walk to sober up. Suddenly, we heard a loud crashing sound coming from down the road.
Accident?
What do you think that noise was?
Both of us switched into emergency mode in an instant. Most of the alcohol had already worn off, and anyway, we could clearly state that we had been drinking if necessary. When you can't be of use, then you can't be of use. But now was not that time. We had to get there as fast as possible. We looked at each other, nodded, tightly held hands, and dashed toward the source of the noise.
Hey, doctor! I'm the doctor!
I'm a paramedic.
So how did you find today's story? Hitting the El Chichinos, heading subscribe buttons really encourages us to keep creating. We're also looking forward to hearing your comments. See you in the next video.